This is Relationship Truth Unfiltered, a podcast that ditches destructive traditions and delves into real biblical teaching about relationships. Welcome. I'm Julie Sedenko here with relationship expert Leslie Vernick, and today we're talking about 3 shifts to move from breakdown to breakthrough. We're going to explore how changing your mindset can really transform your life, discussing practical ways to overcome challenges, shift your negative thinking, and strengthen your identity. Leslie, you say that a person's mindset is critical when it comes to making real changes. Specifically, you'll talk about breakdown versus breakthrough mindset. So, what is a breakdown mindset?
We all are tempted with a breakdown mindset when something tragic happens to us, especially when it's not our fault. When we've been harmed, we've been cheated on, lied to, divorced, sexually abused in our childhood, had a rotten childhood, been robbed, sexually assaulted in college, whatever the story of what happened to you is that the external world did to you. Sometimes I'm afraid that starts to become our story. And that's the mindset that we have to shift. That isn't your story. That is what happened to you. Your story becomes when you shift that to what are you going to do with what happened to you. A really good biblical example of this is Esther. Right? Esther is a book in the Old Testament. She was a young girl. I think she was parentless, but she was at least mentored by an uncle. But for whatever reason, she was captured into the king's harem. We would call it sex slavery today. She was captured as a young woman, probably 12, 13, put into the king's harem to be groomed as one of his concubines. She had no choice. She was victimized. She didn't choose that life. That wouldn't have been the life she chose for her. So what's Esther's story? Well, Esther decides, you know what? I don't have a choice about whether I'm here or not, but I'm going to make the best of it. And she endeared herself to the eunuch, to all different people in the staff. And apparently she became very good at her job because as the king used her as a concubine, she pleased him and she became the next queen. So now Esther's in another bind. She hears a story from her uncle that the king's assistant, Haman, is up to no good. And what does she do? She has to take a brave, bold choice and say, hey, I've got to go in front of the king. She's writing her story as she's living it. Now, she was a victim. She was trafficked into slavery, and yet God used her for noble, grand purposes in God's story. Another example from the Bible is Joseph. Terrible things happened to Joseph. He was victimized by his brothers. He was victimized by Potiphar's wife. He was victimized in jail by the baker and the wine taster who didn't remember him before Pharaoh. And Joseph had every reason to live in the dungeon of his stories. This happened to me. This is so unfair. There must be no God. God is not good. Why is this happening to me? That's the mindset. That's the mindset that has to shift. And so it's okay to go there for a bit. We all do. But if we're not recognizing that that mindset will keep us stuck in a terrible story that we don't have to stay stuck in, then we will live in I am a victim story for far longer than we were a victim because we don't know how to get out of it.
Okay, so how is this not some of that positive mental attitude type of, you know, buck up, everything's going to be great, and denying reality?
Yeah, I think we deny realities in 2 ways. We deny reality and not accepting the suffering that reality brings. And sometimes reality, I have a friend right now who's refusing to accept reality because she doesn't want to deal with the suffering. So the suffering is, the truth is, her husband doesn't love her. Her husband doesn't care about her. Her husband doesn't value her. And she keeps avoiding that reality by, well, maybe if I pray harder, if I get a boob job, if I do this, if I do that, then maybe he'll love me. Sort of like Leah, if I have another baby, maybe now he'll love me. And so she's denying the pain of her suffering by making up a story in her head, her mindset. Oh, this is just a spell. He'll get through this. He must really love me. How could he be with me this long if he didn't really love me? Because the reality of he doesn't love me. He's just using me. That is so painful.
Yeah.
That she doesn't want to go there. And so therefore she stays stuck in this story of everything will be better. So that's a false spirituality as well. So sometimes reality is so hard, we don't want to go there. And the other thing I think that this false spirituality ignores is that there is real suffering in this world. Paul talks about this in 2 Corinthians 4. He said, we are hard pressed on every side. So he's not minimizing. Life is hard. This is rough. And yet we're not despairing. We are downtrodden, but we're not crushed. So he's talking about the both and. Life is hard. Yes, there's suffering. I don't understand everything. And God has a plan. And there's more than I can see. And heaven is great. And someday I'll be there. And there is a story here that I don't know how it's working out, but God does. And so I'm going to trust him. And so I think when we have this Pollyanna attitude, it's like, oh no, God loves me so much, he would never let me suffer. Everything's good. And so we're denying reality. And Jesus says, in this world, you will suffer. You will have hardship. So we're not denying that. Ecclesiastes says there's a time to grieve.
Yes.
There's a time to grieve. There's a time to mourn. And so when you've been victimized, when you've been harmed, there's a time to feel your feels and grieve. And if you stay there longer than you need to, you're going to create additional unnecessary suffering, I call it.
I think back to my sophomore year in college when my sister was killed in a car crash. And it was literally 7 days after we had spent time together on the island where my grandparents lived. So it was such a monumental shock. And the grief was so incredible. She was 6 years younger than me, and had just turned 20. So, but then 2 weeks later, my grandmother gets diagnosed with cancer. And then a few months after that, my grandfather died. So I lost 3 family members in one school year. And I remember the heaviness, the physical weight of it. My legs felt like they were filled with lead, just trying to walk across campus and just trying to mentally process homework. It was very difficult. But then this is where I think Christians sometimes blow it in when dealing with people that are going through this, Leslie, because people would come up and quote Romans 8:28 as though it was a Band-Aid. Or they would say, well, God won't give you more than you can handle. And it was almost denying the weight of the pain. And yet, I guess I'm just trying to find, where is this balance? How much is too much? When do you know that you're in a breakdown? And when do you know you're just processing it's really hard? How do you know when you're in breakdown?
I think that's a really good question. And we're to weep with those who weep. When Job experienced his great losses of his health, his family, his money, his reputation, all those things, Job's friends came to him and sat with him and didn't say a word. They didn't say a word. And so I think there is no words, there's no mindset that erases suffering. So let's get that off the table right now. There is suffering. But you are either going to suffer that brings meaning and purpose to your life, or you're going to suffer and you're in hopelessness, anger, and despair. And for a season, you might be in the first, but you do want to transition into the second. And however long that takes, I'm not the keeper of your life, but you'll know. I think you'll know when I am ready to go to the next step. And you're looking for some sort of meaning in all of this. And the meaning isn't trite, like, oh, she died because the angels needed her.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Or she died because she did something wrong and God is punishing her. That is trying to play God. But the meaning might be in just something simple of saying, wow, life is short. I didn't realize that at 22 or 23 or however old you were when this happened. I can't remember. How many years?
I was 26 and she was 20. Okay.
Yeah. So life is short. I didn't realize that at 26. You think at 26 life goes on forever. You don't think about death. And so being smack in the middle of death for 3 people in your life in this year has to bring some meaning to your life of how you live now. Right? So you don't waste now. You don't throw away now. You're not reckless with now, thinking that you have forever. And that brings meaning to their deaths, that it taught you to smell the roses, to say goodbye and love people and not leave angry, and all of the kind of things that those kind of horrible situations bring to our life that are good. We look for the good in the hard, and that starts to bring some meaning and purpose in the hard. But I think it also, we can get stuck in living in fear and doom and gloom because life is hard. And so what's the next bad thing that's going to happen to me? And what's the
Yes.
next bad person who's going to die in my life? And I can't handle this. That's the mindset of a victim who's saying, I'm afraid to live my life because of what might happen. And that's the last way God wants you to live your life. But so many of us get stuck there, and that becomes our story. We're just stuck in what happened, and I don't want it to happen again. So I'm going to live in fear of what might happen.
Right. That's very good and very true, because I think for a little bit of time, I remember when the phone would ring, I was almost afraid to answer it. But I did grow out of that. And I guess that leads me to the next question. What is a breakthrough mindset?
So here would be a small illustration. So let's say that you're grieving a lost relative, a sister, a parent, a father, a mother, a husband. And in the midst of your sorrow and grief, you have an idea. You say, I could donate their organs, or I could donate their clothes to a homeless shelter. I could do something good with what's left of them. And that little idea begins to move you into purpose and meaning, and hey, something good can come out of this. Not that it happened for that to happen, but that we don't waste anything. That when something bad happens, we want to, the Bible talks about it in Isaiah, that God will show you the treasures hidden in the dark places. And so when you have that thought, when you begin to have that thought, that's a God thought. That's a miracle to bring a little light into the dark, to help you see. Not this is why it happened, so I could donate his clothes to the homeless shelter. Not at all. But what might be possible now that this has happened?
That actually reminds me again, probably within a year after my sister's death, I used to take a quilt of hers, and I was speaking at a camp, and it was late at night going into the mountains above Yucaipa, California, and there had been a boy that was hit on his bicycle. It was dark, and his friends were all with him. They had been riding bikes, and he passed away. And I was sitting on the side of this mountain. It was getting chilly with these kids. And I remember it was a little bit emotional for me, but I went and I got Holly's quilt, and I put it around these kids who were facing the death of their lost friend. And it was just, it was very meaningful for me. I don't even think that they realized, but to be able to do something like that, and then I stayed and I followed the coroner home to this mother's house as she was given notification, because I knew that I knew what that was like, and I knew she would want to know I was with her son and have my name and those types of things. So it has given me a different perspective, I guess, for other people going through those things, or not wanting to stop by this, to just drive by the scene of an accident if I can help, or that type of thing. But yeah, it's not Holly died because or so that I could do that.
No, but you found the diamond in the dirt. And so Paul says in 2 Corinthians that sometimes we're allowed to suffer so that we might be able to enter into the suffering of someone else. And I think, even my life with my mom's abuse and my own struggle with depression, sometimes I think that helps me to be a much more tenderhearted, wise counselor. Had I not gone through those experiences, it would be easy just to say, oh, buck it up or trust God. But I've been through the trenches, and I know that buck it up, trust God doesn't help someone when they're in the grieving place. And buck it up, trust God doesn't help people usually when they're in the good places. But there are some things that do help them. And so I think it's important that we understand that, again, there's a season for each thing, but we don't want to stay in the season of this happened to me without moving into, at some point, what am I going to do with what happened to me? And that is a shift of mindset, and it requires you owning your choice. I didn't have a choice for this to happen to me, whatever it is. I didn't have a choice the parents I got. I didn't have a choice, to be, sexually assaulted as a child. I didn't have a choice about, different things that happened in my life. But I do have a choice about what I'm going to do with those things, how I'm going to process them, how I'm going to let them continue to impact my mind, my spirit, and my character. Because we've seen people who have become really bitter, ugly, mean-spirited, horrible human beings because of what happened to them.
Yes.
And we've also seen people who, it's amazing, like they have such horrible stories, and then they have this love and light and beauty that's shining out of their eyes. And it's like, how did you get there? How did you get there?
I always think of Horatio Spafford, who lost his family and or all of his children. And when if you don't know the story, when he's crossing the sea and the captain tells him, this is where your children died, this is the spot, and he penned, "It is well with my soul," that beautiful, beautiful hymn. And I can never think of it without thinking of this man and his incredible deep grief. And it just puts things into perspective. Hey, you. Yeah, you. I see you sitting there feeling stuck. Okay, I don't actually see you. Don't be freaked out. But I can't imagine you sitting there, tired of the same old patterns. Maybe you've been through things that have left you feeling small, like your story is out of your control. But let me tell you something. It's not too late to change that. It's really not. The Empowered to Change program was made for women just like you. Women who are ready to stop just surviving and start thriving. Imagine finally knowing how to handle challenges, problems, without losing the person that you want to be. Setting boundaries that protect your peace and your heart. Living a life that feels strong, purposeful, and yours. This isn't just another online course. It is a 6-month journey with expert coaches who will walk with you every step of the way. It is not about quick fixes. This is about real transformation. Listen, I know life hasn't been fair, but you have the power right now to say, this is not how my story is going to end. So here is your next step. Go to leslievernick.com/empowered. Put this on pause and do it right now. You don't have to figure this out alone. We are here to help. Your breakthrough is waiting. Let's write a new chapter starting today. Leslie, what are the steps from going from this breakdown to breakthrough mindset? How do you practically begin to see, okay, I have choices. I accept that this is hard, and moving into a breakthrough mindset? Because it's just so easy to feel stuck.
I think we get stuck in resisting reality. I think that's our biggest problem as human beings. It's like we're arguing with God. Why did this happen? This shouldn't have happened. Why did this happen to me? I can't believe this happened. I'm so mad at this happened. And we're
And are you good?
Yeah, and are you good? Yeah. So we're stuck in resisting reality when Jesus is really clear. Sin makes this world really hard. This is not his design. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. This is the way it is, though. It was hard for Jesus. It's going to be hard for us in varying degrees. And some people seem to get a boatload more hard than others. And I'm not sure I understand all that. So I think it's wrong for us to judge someone should be further along in their journey. But there is no easy life. Even people who look like they have an easy life, where they have plenty of money maybe, and they have that fame, or they have a great career. I mean, a lot of those people have killed themselves. A lot of those people are dying from drug overdoses. They're not any happier than those people who are scraping by, who have a different mindset. And so it's so important for us to understand that in this world, we will have troubles, but those troubles can beat us down, or they can make us stronger. And that is our choice. We don't have the choice of, no thanks, I don't want any troubles. Just give me pillows and cotton candy and sunshine all day long. And if we had that kind of life, it would be kind of boring, and we would be lazy, fat, and apathetic. And so God doesn't give us that kind of life. He allows bumps in the road, sometimes big bumps, sometimes really hard bumps. But we are co-authoring our story with God, just like the Bible characters did, just like David did, just like Joseph did, just like Esther did, just like Abigail did. And the decisions we make or don't make a difference in how the rest of the story goes. Let's just do an example. Let's say that your kid is driving you crazy, and
I don't have to try very hard.
so let's just make this really practical. And you feel like, oh, I can't handle all these kids. This is too much for me. I just can't do it. And so that mindset is going to lead you to reacting to your children in anger and frustration and screaming and yelling. And then that leads to you feeling regretful, like, I'm a horrible mom. I should have never had so many kids. I can't believe that I'm so horrible. So this mindset's creating your story, right? I can't handle it. Then I don't handle it because I'm blowing up and reacting. Then I'm feeling bad about myself, and I'm creating my parenting story. This is the kind of parent I am. I'm a reactive, explosive, regretful mom. But we don't stop and ask ourselves, is this the story we really want to write? We only get one chance at parenting. They're grown in 20 years. So is this the story of parenting I want to write? Well, who's the person who's stepping back and evaluating that? You are. You are, just like the person who's standing back regretting that you just reacted. And so this is what we talk a lot about this in our coaching groups. We talk about really noticing when you have regret about how you were or what you did, the choices you made. Pay attention to that, because that is your better self. That's your noble self trying to say to you, hey, we could write a better story here. We could write a better story here if you learn to manage your emotions. We could write a better story here if you didn't have the mindset that you can't handle this, that you're too weak to handle this. We could write a better story of how you're showing up as a mom if you got a better night's sleep instead of spending 2 hours on Facebook while the kids went to sleep. So what I'm saying is that you are the author of your parenting story, right? So this isn't tragic. We're not talking about tragedy because we're just kind of making it real for everybody. You're the author of your parenting story, how you show up as a parent. You're not in charge of all the characters in your story. You've got
Right.
characters who are going to bug the heck out of you. You're going to have characters who are good to you and characters that are bad. Every good story has bad guys in there, right? At least temporary bad guys. And so, but you get to, and this is the mindset shift. I'm not just a victim of all these kids who are hooligans and running all over the house, and I have no power here. You have absolute power, not power over your children, but power over yourself and how you want to show up as a parent. Now, let's say you show up as the kind of parent that you're really proud of. Hey, kids, time out for everybody. Everybody's losing a little bit. Everybody go to their room for 5 minutes. Maybe that's a way that you calm yourself down, is everybody gets a timeout, including you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might get some kickback from your kids, especially if they're not used to you being a more controlled, self-controlled parent. But as you practice these new steps of being aware and not reacting, but letting your noble self, the person that you most admire in yourself, handle the situation, not just your emotions, but you with your virtues and your values, you handle the situation. Your kids may not like it, but you're not going to feel regretful. You're going to feel a whole lot better about yourself and your parenting story, especially as it stretches out over the years.
What strategies can people use to identify negative self-talk? Because sometimes I think we don't even realize that we might be in breakdown thinking. And, these automatic thoughts that kind of contribute to a breakdown mindset. We don't even realize we're doing it sometimes.
Here's a chart that we use in our coaching groups that might be helpful for you to picture. I don't have it here, but I'm just going to visualize. Just make 3 columns. The first column, put in there. So here's how you're going to track your thoughts. First column, put your facts in. So your sister died. Okay, so those are the facts.
Mm-hmm.
And those are hard reality. So if somebody dies, how do you feel? You're supposed to feel sad. You're supposed to feel hurt. But not everybody does. Some people are glad that someone died, right?
Oh, wow.
Abigail probably was really glad that her husband Nabal died,
That's true.
right? He was a foolish, wicked man. So not everybody feels that way. So you've got the facts of a story, and then you've got your feelings. Your feelings were really, really sad. But Abigail's feelings were, yippee, I'm done with this man. I don't have to listen to him anymore, right? So she had very different feelings about a death in her family, right? So there's something in the middle of that we have to pay attention to. So you've got the facts, you've got your feelings. So let's do an exercise for our listeners. This might be helpful. Let's do the facts of your husband's not home yet. That's the truth.
Okay.
And just saying that, Julie, how might you feel?
He's having an affair.
That's the story you're telling yourself. That's the middle column. Okay. So if you're telling yourself, oh my gosh, he's having an affair, how are you going to feel?
I'm going to feel scared. I'm going to feel angry. I'm going to be going down to rabbit trails of, what am I going to do? Do I divorce him? How am I going to catch him? How am I going to prove it?
Okay.
How's this argument going to go?
Okay.
I mean,
and so let's imagine that he comes home and you start accusing him of all that because you've made up a story in your head of what's true that you don't know is true.
right.
Right? Now, there might be some evidence from past experience that makes you believe it's more true than not true, but you don't know for sure that's true. But as you react to what he's doing, now he's reacting to you like, why do you accuse me of everything? You're crazy.
Right.
Get off my back. And so this starts a downward spiral in relationship. Let's say he's home late for work and you don't feel angry at all. What might be you thinking? What else might you be thinking if he's home late?
I might not be thinking anything because I'm busy with the kids and I didn't even notice the time.
Okay, yeah. You didn't even notice. Yeah. So his lateness didn't affect you emotionally at all. So other situations might be that you feel scared because you're thinking, oh my gosh, what if he's in a car accident?
Right.
And he's at the hospital and nobody can call me and he didn't have a cell phone with him, all those. And so we're all worked up. And so we can tell ourselves stories. And this is really important. So I remember working with a woman. So going back to the victim story, her dad sexually abused her when her mother was in the hospital having a second child.
Mm.
And so that's the facts. Ugly, 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 ugly facts. But here's the story she told herself. It's all my fault because I went into his bed that night because I was scared.
Oh my goodness.
So now her self-esteem, her story, her life is based on a lie, an understandable lie for a little kid to tell herself. But she would have enough work to do just being sexually abused by her dad. But the story that she told herself, it's all my fault. I was a bad kid. This is why it happened. This is why God let it happen. All of that really messed with her self-esteem, her agency, all of those kind of things. And it was based on a lie. It wasn't true, but she didn't even evaluate. She couldn't. She was a little kid. But this is part of the work that we do in our coaching groups is we help you identify some of those lies that you believe. The fact is your husband left you. All right, that's hard enough to deal with. But if you're telling yourself a story, it's because I didn't have enough sex with him, my boobs weren't big enough, it's because I'm not pretty enough, there's something about me that if only I had made this better, he would have stayed. You're telling yourself lies, but it's making you feel awful, awful, right? And so this mindset piece is really critical to you moving on with a different kind of story, because the story that you tell yourself, I can't handle it. I can't do this. I'm too stupid. I can't go back to school. I could never support myself. That's a story. Those aren't the facts. Those are the stories you're telling yourself in breakdown mode. And when you tell yourself that, that's the story you create. I can't, I don't. And you stay in the repetitive pattern of breakdown the rest of your life, which God isn't wanting you to do.
Okay, so getting back to really practical, give me some techniques or approaches that a person can take to go from this breakdown mindset to recognize I'm thinking about this all wrong and to begin to start thinking differently.
Well, the first step is to notice. So that exercise that I just gave you, that 3-column thing, you didn't even notice you were telling yourself a story. You just thought it was true, right? So you have to start by noticing, oh my gosh, the facts are he's late, but I'm kind of creating a whole big story out of this. And it could be true. But then again, he might be in an accident. He's not having an affair. I don't know for sure, but I am working. I used to do this with my daughter when she was driving. She'd be driving, when she was 16, 17 with her license. And so the facts are she's out Friday night taking the car and I'm creating a story like, oh my gosh, she's going to get stalked. She's going to get stopped by a policeman who's not really a policeman. She's going to get in a car ditch. And, we didn't have cell phones at the time. It's like, she's going to be stuck and froze to death. And so I was having major anxiety because not she was driving, but because I was creating a huge negative story about her driving.
Parenting before Life 360.
So I can't change my anxiety. We can't say, oh, just calm down, just trust God. The problem isn't my feelings. My feelings are responding to my story. Just like if you're watching a movie, even though you know it's not true, your feelings are responding to the movie.
Mm.
So the area that you have to look at is your thinking. So what am I thinking? What is the story I'm telling myself that's making me feel so sad, so bad? And even in death, right? Your sister died. That's horrible enough. I had a client whose child died riding his bike, and he got killed by a car, and it wasn't the driver's fault. It wasn't, the child was just stupid and went out between two cars, like she told him not to, and he got killed. But she was telling herself it was all my fault. I shouldn't have let him out to ride his bike that day. So it's bad enough to lose a child. You're going to feel heavy enough grief, but imagine the heavy grief she had because it's my fault that he died.
Yeah.
So that's the first step, is to notice. So do that chart. What are the facts? What is the story I'm telling myself? Look at my feelings. And then we get mad at ourselves because we're having such feelings, but we're reacting out of the story. We're not reacting out of the facts usually. All right. And if we are reacting out of the facts, my daughter died, make sure it matches. This is appropriate. It's appropriate to sob my eyes out if my daughter died or my sister died, right? It's appropriate to have some grief and downtime. Even when Lazarus died and Jesus knew he was going to raise him from the dead, he cried. He wept.
Yes.
Right. And so don't beat yourself up for that, but be careful that you're not telling yourself a story. I should have never let her drive that day. It's my fault. All that kind of stuff. So that would be the first thing. You have to notice what your thinking is. So if you tend to always feel paralyzed in inaction, you're probably telling yourself a lot of stories like, I can't, I'm not smart enough, I could never figure that out, I'm not good enough, I'll never make it on my own. And none of that is true. That's just a story you're telling yourself, but it affects your emotions and it affects your action steps. Because if you don't feel you can fix the toilet, then you're not going to go on a YouTube video and try.
Right.
Right. But if you think, you know what, maybe I could do that. What might be possible if I could fix that toilet and I don't have to wait till my husband comes home? And you go on YouTube and you learn how to fix a toilet. How do you feel about yourself?
Amazing.
Empowered. And that's how you change your story. I can fix the toilet versus.
We have so many of our Conquer ladies that when we share our
Yes.
wins during calls and they're like, I fixed this and I did this. And yeah, it's a big deal.
But it's the mindset shift from I can't, I don't know how. My husband used to do that and I don't know how to do that versus, well, I guess I can learn. What do I need to learn? Where's YouTube? How can I find that? Where can I get the information I need? I can go back to school. I can support myself. And when you begin to shift your mindset from negative victim land, everybody's doing this to me, to what might I do, it changes the rest of the story. And I'm going to share a story of someone who had a really horrible experience, and he was a victim of death. He had brain cancer. And nobody at a young age wants brain cancer. I mean, it'd be like, ugh. So he's got brain cancer. He's got about a year to live. And he went through all the feels of, why me? And I can't believe it's happening to me. And I don't deserve this. I'm too young. And all of that, kids, all of that. And then he shifted his mindset and he asked himself a powerful question. So here's the facts. I have brain cancer. He could tell himself a story. This isn't fair. Why me? Why do I have to live like this? Where is God? If God exists at all, my kids aren't going to have a father. This is going to be horrible for my wife. He could just stay in that land.
Yeah.
Right. And how is the rest of his story going to look? He only has a year now. How's the rest of his year going to play out? He's going to be angry and bitter and really, really sick. And so this is the question he asked himself. What matters most now? Changed everything.
Yes.
Changed everything. What matters most now? Not my medical practice, not my bank account. What matters most now is loving my children for the next year as best I can, while I can. And it changed his whole family. Through the horrible death of their dad, it brought them closer than they would have ever been had that not happened. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And yet there was so much beauty and good that came out of it. But he wrote that part of the story because he changed his mindset, not why me and this isn't fair and poor me, to, okay, this is me. It sucks. And now what matters most now?
We only have so much time in a podcast, and I know that some people are listening and it feels a little overwhelming to just do this. So you have your Empowered to Change group that is open. Talk a little bit about the actual work that somebody will go through in this group and how they can have some help doing this whole process.
Yeah, so I think that I think people need some lessons on growing up. What does it look like to be a functioning adult? And Empower to Change isn't about dealing with the other person. Okay, so we have a lot of women who follow us who are in destructive marriages, for sure. And we want to help you know how to get yourself safe and sane and clear and strong and not just reactive and shut down in trauma mode. But we really want you to take responsibility for your growth. When we talk about mindset, Jesus talks about it a lot, or the Bible talks about it a lot. It says, take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Why? Because he knows we tell ourselves crazy stories. He says, you have the mind of Christ, use it. But where is it? We can't find it. And so we really teach women. We take 15 women and put them in one group with one coach for 6 months. And we have a curriculum that you watch every other week. And then you have a coaching group for 90 minutes so that you apply that curriculum to your mindset and to we call her your noble self. So if we think really quickly about ourself inside, Paul tells us, put off your old self and put on your new self. But we don't know how to do that. Like, where is my new self? I don't even know what it is. And so we talk about that new self as our noble self. It's a self that God made us to become. And it has virtues and values. And so when that noble self isn't in alignment with our reactive self, we're going to feel shame. We're going to feel guilty and bad because we know we could do better. And so it's developing that noble self so that you can notice when other parts of you, just like most of us are mature enough in our physical self to notice when we have to go to the bathroom, right? We don't just pee all over ourselves like we did when we were children. But emotionally, we pee all over ourselves and pee all over other people with our words because we don't know how to notice that, oops, I'm about to say some ugly things, just like I noticed, oops, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm not going to have a conversation right now. I'm going to go to the bathroom and take care of me. Sometimes we don't notice that we're out of capacity. And then we just vomit all over someone. And then we regret it because our noble self's values are, that's not the kind of woman I want to be. That's not the kind of mother I want to be. That's not the kind of wife I want to be. That's not the kind of friend I want to be, or daughter or person. And so we help you learn how to do that. Your parents taught you how to hold your urine or pay attention to your bowel movements so that you landed in the toilet when you had to go and you didn't shame yourself that way publicly. But look at our culture. They're shaming themselves publicly by
All the
just
time.
ranting and raving all the time because they don't know how to regulate their emotions. And so this class will give you both curriculum that you watch every other week from me, as well as then the opportunity to put it into practice week by week with your coaches. And you have 15 women who are doing the same thing. So there's a Facebook group that you can support each other with and experiment. And failure isn't failure. Failure is learning. So if I try to do something and it doesn't work, then that teaches me something. Oh, that's not the right color for this painting. I'd like to do painting. And when it doesn't work and it looks horrible, I don't just throw the painting away. I say, oops, that's a lesson. That color and that color do not look good together. I got to change colors. And that's good because now you're growing and you're learning and your mindset is curiosity, not perfection.
Well, I think this class in particular is so powerful because it is just 15 women. Your class won't be any bigger than that. So it's very personal, and it goes on for 6 months. So you really build these deep relationships with other women who are working on some of the same things. It doesn't necessarily even have to be marital. It can be other types of breakdown.
Well, and it's not marital because what we're telling women is that even in marriage, whatever happens in your marriage is something for you to learn. So let me give an example. Let's say that you're married to a harsh, angry, destructive man, and you keep trying to get him to listen, and you keep trying to get him to love you, and you keep trying to get him to be a better dad, and he's not having it. And you're just pulling your hair out because you're getting shut down, you're getting ignored, you're getting scared, and you don't know what to do. Well, instead of trying to fix him, why don't you look at yourself like, wow, I'm aware I don't know how to have boundaries. I'm aware I don't know how to speak up for myself in a good way. I'm aware that I'm so dependent on him that he has a lot of power over me. I better learn to get a little bit more independent, not just financially, but even emotionally. If I need him to approve of what I do in order for me to be okay, then I can't go back to college. Then I can't take an online course. Then I can't work part-time. because he's going to tell me I can't do it. Like he's my boss when he's my husband. And so there's a lot of work that we have to do, not to fight back, but to be whole, to be mature. Because our first task as human beings isn't to be a good wife. Our first, or a good mother, even. We can't be a good wife or a good mother if we're unhealthy ourselves or immature. Children don't make good parents,
Wow, that's good.
right? Children don't make good spouses, and children can't take care of themselves. And so God's will is for you to mature and live a holy life. And so this class is about how does God bring the events of your life, your marriage, your parents, your mother, your job, whatever, as a training ground in maturity. Like I have a friend who's been sinned against quite a bit, and I said, you're having to learn this lesson a lot because you're not learning it. What's the lesson I have to learn? I think God's trying to teach you how to forgive, but you're not willing to learn it. You just stay mad at everybody who's hurt you. So you keep getting hurt over and over and over again. What might be possible if you learned the lesson to forgive? Maybe they would still be scoundrels. I'm not saying they would change, but maybe you wouldn't be so angry and torn up all the time that you're getting unhealthy. You're getting sick. Every time I talk to you, you've got a cold. Every time I talk to you, you don't feel good. Do you think anger has anything to do with that?
Empower to Change is not free, obviously. Talk about the investment and especially speak to the woman who feels guilty about spending money on herself, whose budget is maybe tight, and why investing in this class would be worth it.
Well, I think they have to decide what's important, just like the man who was dying of brain cancer, what matters most now. And so I think for too long, women have felt virtuous, sacrificing themselves on the altar of everybody else. So I'll stay up late and clean up the house. Everybody else gets a good night's sleep. But then what does it cost you in the morning? Cost you you're crabby, you're not showing up as a good mom, you're impatient, you're eating too much to stay awake. So sacrificing ourselves to do for everyone else what they should be doing for themselves, doing their laundry, picking up their chores, all the kind of things that good moms that we've been taught do, are selfless, sacrificial, and then they're worn out, resentful, and angry. So if you want to give to your family and you love doing it and you don't have a tinge of resentment, do it. That's God's gift that you have in serving others. But if you find yourself giving and giving and giving and feeling pretty worn out and resentful because nobody gives back to you, understand you're giving in order to get approval, in order to get an attagirl, in order to get something back from them that you're not getting, and it's getting on your nerves. And so it might be that you need to invest in yourself right now, because if you don't grow up, worse things can happen in relationships and in you. And so God calls you to grow up. And if you don't have the opportunity to do that with trusted people in your church, or you don't know the steps to take, you may have to invest in that. Just like when you want a certain job, you invest in a curriculum, a course to take so that you can get certified in certain things, so that you can learn those skills. If you have cancer, you go to the doctor and you get chemotherapy so that you can get well and live. And so it may be that you need to say, hey, this is important for me. I want to get well. When Jesus asked that man who'd been paralyzed for 38 years by the pool of Bethesda in John chapter 5, I believe, do you want to get well? I used to think that was a crazy question. Who doesn't want to get well? But we want it to be easy, costless, and it doesn't work that way. When you want something, you usually have to invest, the very least, your time and your energy. This is 6 months of time. It's a good deal of energy, and when you put your money to it, you're more likely to do it and more likely to show up.
Right.
And my coaches also get paid. And so we have to do that. But I think that when you invest your money in something for yourself, you're much more committed to following through. And we want you to do that because this is critical to your growth.
Leslie, pray for the women listening right now that are in a breakdown mindset, that are facing some really difficult times.
Father, we see from Scripture that people are going to face difficult times. We don't get a pass just because we believe in Jesus. It's how we face difficult times that matters. Do we face it in fear and hopelessness and anger and bitterness and despair? Helpless? Or do we face it with courage, curiosity, love, truth, strength, and grace? The Proverbs 31 woman is described with strength and dignity as her clothing. And because of that, she can smile at the future unafraid. Lord, perfect love casts out fear, and yet so many Christian women I know live in fear. What's going to happen? What are people going to think? I can't be alone. I can't live alone. I don't know how to grow up. Being a grown-up means we do know how to do those things. Even if we don't want to, we know how to. And I pray, Lord, that any woman listening would not want to stay in victim mindset, immature, childish, helpless. I need a rescuer. I need a Prince Charming to fix this for me. I can't fix it myself. Lord, sometimes you do bring helpers to help us learn to fix it ourselves. Learn to deal with our feelings that are out of control. Learn how to deal with our thoughts that are wayward, ungodly. Learn to deal with our heart that feels so lonely and confused at times. And Lord, I pray that anyone listening would really commit, even if they can't do anything more than just this first step, that they would be a God-centered woman and not a human-centered woman, not a marriage-centered woman, not a church-centered woman, not a child-centered woman, but a God-centered woman. Because I believe that your Holy Spirit will speak to them about what their next right step is after that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for tuning in today. Before you go, I need to tell you something important, something I don't want you to miss. Your story, yes, your story, is far from over. I know life hasn't been easy. Maybe you've been through things that left you feeling stuck, broken. But hear me on this. You are so much more than the hard things you've faced. If you're thinking, I don't know how to change this, you don't have to figure it out alone. You'll get professional coaching and a small group of women on a similar journey in our Empowered to Change program. You'll go through a step-by-step process of learning how to think differently, how to set boundaries that protect your heart, and how to reclaim the strength and joy that are inside you. This is your moment, not next week, not next year, right now. Go to leslievernick.com/empowered to find out more and sign up, because your story deserves a better ending. Let's write it together. Take care of your heart, friend. Until next time.